Hello everyone, this is Select and I'm finally doing an aftermath video for the 2025 Western Australian state election. I was hoping for some more conclusive results by now, but it seems like the votes are taking a while to be counted in some seats. We do have every seat accounted for apart from 9. Those 9 are Albany, Dawesville, Fremantle, Kalamunda, Kalgoorlie, Murray Wellington, Pilbara, South Perth, and Warren Blackwood. So if we go on to my map, this is what it looks like at the moment. So my prediction was a little bit off. I thought the Libs would do a bit better. I thought they would win the seats of South Perth, which is inconclusive at the moment, Riverton, Bateman, Kingsley, and Scarborough. It looks like the Nationals will probably do as well as I expected. They'll probably win Albany and Warren Blackwood. Although Albany is sort of like this interesting, like three-way contest between the Nationals, the Liberals, and Labor. The Nationals are in front of the Liberal Party, like very, very slightly. So it really just comes down to where a lot of these sort of preferences down here go. I assume that people like One Nation and the Christians and the Shooters and Fishers will put the Nationals over the Liberals. So I do think the Nationals will end up winning that seat. The Labor Party has already admitted defeat on that one. Warren Blackwood is also another one of those where we have sort of like a three-cornered contest where probably the Labor Party will lose, but it could be either the Nationals or the Liberal Party winning. Again, I think it's probably going to be the Nationals. The Liberal Party did overperform a little bit in places like Kalamunda and in Murray Wellington, where both places they could very well win. And also Dawesville, I said in the comments that that was sort of like a 50-50. I think I said the same thing about Kalamunda. So it seems like the Liberal Party overperformed a little bit in sort of the outer suburbs and the regions, but very much underperformed in the inner city, which is also very much the trend that we saw in the Queensland election. Very, very similar stuff in the Queensland election, where I believe the coalition picked up like one seat in the whole of Brisbane, and then in the regions, that's where they absolutely smashed the Labor Party. Even seats like Kalgoorlie and Pilbara are not confirmed yet. Pilbara is another interesting sort of three-way contest, but I think on that, it's a little bit more obvious that it's going to be between the Labor Party and the Liberals, because the National Party are like down like 8%, as you can see here. So theoretically, they could catch the Liberal Party if they got like a lot of like One Nation and Shooters and Fishers and Farmers preferences and stuff like that, like theoretically. But I don't think it's probably going to happen. But I think seats like, Pilbara, they're quite sort of rural. There's a lot of these seats typically take longer to count. So, I mean, maybe that's why I shouldn't be as surprised that seats like Kalgoorlie and Pilbara haven't gotten results yet. But generally, we did not expect the Liberals and the Nationals to get anywhere close to majority. But together, they have done pretty much almost as worst case scenario for the Liberal Party in this election. And there's even a chance that the Liberal Party may not regain the office of official opposition. If we go with all the sort of expected seats, so Labor's expected to win Pilbara, Labor's expected to win Kalgoorlie, I think the Nationals will win Albany and Warren Blackwood. Labor will probably win Dawesville, but Liberals will probably pick up a surprise win in Murray Wellington, which actually one on Survivor on Twitter predicted. Liberals will probably win Kalamunda, and Labor will probably win the other two seats of South Perth and Fremantle. So in this situation, the Liberal Party only just edges out as the official opposition. But if the Liberal Party happens to lose either Murray Wellington or Kalamunda, sorry, I know I have pronounced that wrong in the past, and if the Nationals somehow get a surprise win in Pilbara, that's when we're going to see the National Party have the mandate to be the official opposition. If they have equal seats, I don't really know what happens there. Maybe the Nationals will claim because they were the official opposition before, they get to stay as the official opposition. I don't know how that works. But definitely a very poor result for the Liberal Party in WA. I would say this is sort of an okay result for the Nationals. I know that the previous leader of the Nationals, who is going for the seat of Bullwinkle, which we'll discuss in more detail later in this video, was a little bit disappointed with the National Party results in seats like Kalamunda. The National Party was trying for some sort of urban seats this election, but they did win Geraldton pretty handily, so I don't think it's all that bad for them, really. So let's get on to the Legislative Council. This is pretty interesting. It looks like the Labour Party will actually win 16 seats, which actually overdid my expectations for them. The Liberal Party will probably win 11 seats, which was on sort of the low sides of my expectations. The Greens will probably win 4. One Nation will win 1. The Nationals will win 2. The Christians will win 1. Legalized cannabis will win 1. And this final seat is sort of up for grabs. The shooters underperform. Look, I should have realized the shooters weren't going to do very well. Like, I did not see that on the ballot paper they were literally going to be listed as SFFPWA, which I think is a key reason why they lost. They also have like a sort of a lot of competition with the Nationals growing stronger and also the Libertarian Party, but also the Libertarian Party did especially badly. I believe they were the least polled party on the whole ticket. So I don't know if libertarianism as a whole isn't that popular in WA, or the campaign didn't really reach people. I'm not exactly sure why they did so badly, but it's likely that neither of those two parties will get the last seat. I think it will probably be Animal Justice who wins that last seat. I believe they've got about half a quota, and in New South Wales, in times past where the Animal Justice has had something like half a quota, they've usually been pretty good at picking up preferences in optional preferential voting systems. So this is how I think the parliament will look like. I think it's pretty good for the left side of politics and for the Labour Party. People have been saying the Greens will hold the balance of power, but I don't really agree with that conclusion, given the Labour Party can work with like legalized cannabis, Animal Justice, and then like just one other of the crossbench to pass legislation, or they can work with like the Nationals, legalized cannabis, or Nationals and like One Nation and Christians. They have a lot of options here, but generally I think the electoral reforms have done the Labour Party reasonably well. This election, I think, was on the money. If they wanted to have a lot of partners to work with in the upper house, it means that they really don't have to just rely on the Greens. Some really interesting seats was Cottesloe and Fremantle, where both independents did pretty well. The one in Fremantle, it seems like they're only just going to miss out on getting the seat. For a while we thought that they were probably going to get it, but it seems like the more those late votes came in, the more they struggled. That's pretty typical with independents. And then the one in Cottesloe was like 55-45, which is pretty good considering the fact that this is one of the only 2 seats that remain with the Liberal Party after last WA election. But yeah, big surprises were Bateman and Scarborough. Them remaining with the Labour Party was pretty unexpected. And then a lot of these seats like Nedlands and Churchlands only just were edged out by the Liberal Party. So yeah, very poor performance in the inner city by the Liberal Party. And that leads me on to discussing what's going to happen with the federal election. So from what One on Survivor told me was that essentially the Labour Party did as well in this state election, about as well as federal Labour did at the last federal election, plus about 2 or 3%. So they did about 2 or 3% better than they did at that election. So what I've done is I've looked at the 2 party preferreds of all of the sort of seats that match sort of the key seats, which are Tangney, Bullwinkle, and I guess I also looked at Moore too, because I was kind of curious, and also Curtin. And I sort of tried to figure out what I can ascertain from those results. So Tangney takes in the seats of about half of Jandakot, Riverton, Bateman, Bicton, and about 30% of Southern River. So here's Jandakot here, and it's got about a 6% margin to the Labour Party. Bicton is up here, it's about 61% to the Labour Party, so that was a very strong retain for the Labour Party. Bateman, 53% to the Labour Party. Riverton down here, 54% to the Labour Party. And Southern River which is about 73.8% to the Labour Party. So you can see a theme here of the Labour Party winning all of these seats, and the margins are not really that close. Now, if we assume that these margins are going to be about 2 or 3% better than how Labour will do federally, and then we also take in the swing that we see on the poll Bludger for WA federally, which is about 2%, we can sort of ascertain that federal Labour will probably do about 4 or 5% worse than in this WA state election. And even with that, it doesn't look like the Labour Party are really at risk of losing Tangney if you do the math there. All of these seats didn't really experience really great swings. Like we have 5% Bicton, we've got 3.6% in Bateman, we've got 6.5% in Nedlands, we've got 9.4% in Southern River, but this was on a huge margin, don't forget that, and a 7% swing in Riverton. I don't think looking at the swings is really a good measure of how I think like the federal election will swing, obviously, because this is coming back from a really weak base for the Liberal Party last election. Remember, the two-party preferred last WA state election was 70-30 to the Labour Party. But if you compare those swings to other parts of WA, where we're getting like 18% swings, 16% swings, 20% swings at Swan Hills, it's clear that this area that makes up the federal seat of Tangney is not the place where Labour is really getting hit very hard. So I think this spells really good news for the Labour Party in Tangney. As for Bullwinkle, that makes up mostly the seats of Kalamunda, which is one of the few seats that the Liberal Party are probably going to pick up, but only on a very small margin, 50.4%. It's also part of the seat of Central Wheatbelt, where Labour got about an 11% swing against them. And the other seat that is part of it is Darling Range. So I looked at sort of like where these seats sort of match up to the seat of Bullwinkle, and I did sort of establish that, yeah, it looks like there would be enough of a swing against the Labour Party for the coalition to probably pick up Bullwinkle. Primary votes for Labour in these areas are around the same as where they were in the last WA federal election, or they've dropped, sometimes by quite a fair bit. Like, for example, here, Labour's on 24.7% in Northam, and here's Bullwinkle. If we look at like the federal results for Northam, like Labour's polling around like 32%, 33%. So even in like the WA state where Labour is significantly more popular than federal WA Labour at the moment, the Labour Party are struggling in parts of Bullwinkle. So this really does suggest that Labour are in trouble in Bullwinkle. As for Curtin, this is sort of a bit more difficult to ascertain because obviously this is an independent versus the Labour Party, and I don't really think we can really garner that much information from how well the independent did in Cottesloe, because obviously it's not the same independent, and these teal independent candidates tend to underperform their sort of federal counterparts in these state elections. An example would be the Victorian state election of 2022. But what we have seen in the seats that make up Curtin is that I can expect through my little algorithm there should be about a 1 or 2% swing against the Labour Party in this area. The Labour Party got a two-party preferred in the seat of Curtin last election of about 44 to 56. So it was quite weak for the Labour Party compared to the independent. And even if we assume there's going to be like a 1 or 2% swing against Kate Chaney as well, there's also the fact that Kate Chaney, only just won the seat. She has the sophomore effect. It also could be the case that the federal opposition is even less popular in these kind of areas than the WA state Liberal Party. And so there has been some people who are saying like, oh, Kate Chaney's not safe. They look at like the Liberal primary vote in Cottesloe and they say, oh, it's over 50%. The Liberal Party still have a chance here. The swings in seats that made up the federal seats of Curtin were pretty lackluster. Like, look here in Churchill, 3%, Nedlands, 6.5%, Scarborough was 5%. Again, these aren't very huge swings. They're pretty underwhelming, at least compared to a lot of the kinds of swings that we saw in other parts of WA. So look, I just don't see Kate Chaney losing the seat. I think this absolutely points to a very good chance of her holding on. So Kareen is in the federal seat of Moore, and the Labour Party did get quite a big swing against them there. Joondalup, which is also in Moore, minus 19% swing. Kingsley, 13% swing. And Hillary's, that one was a bit smaller. So Kareen was a pretty decisive win for the Liberal Party. Hillary's is still pretty strong for the Labour Party. Joondalup 56.6, Kingsley 54. So if this was like a federal seat, these combined seats, it would sort of be like a pretty marginal seat. So this might show that despite the swings, maybe Ian Goodenough has a chance. And again, Ian Goodenough is not Labour. I don't think he's sort of out of the count yet. Like, there was people who were suggesting that the Labour Party were at risk of losing the seat of Kingsley or even Hillary's, and they didn't. So maybe there isn't such a huge thirst for the Liberal Party here. As for the seat of Pierce, which many people are suspecting is on the target list for the Liberal Party, I'm just going to show you how the Labour Party did in the corresponding seats. So that's Butler, Minderee, and Wanneroo. Butler, the Labour Party, very strong there, even though they got a big swing against them. Minderee, also pretty strong there. And Wanneroo, pretty strong there. So all three of them are over 60%. So I actually don't think the Labour Party is in too much trouble there. Like, the swings are big, but I federally, like, the seat's on like a 10% margin. Like, I get it. Like, there was probably a swing against the whole Christian Porter thing last time. But to make up like a 9 or 10% swing or something like that, I don't really see it happening at the moment. I think that it's more likely that they'll be closer to like a 5 or a 6% swing. So I think Labour Party is safe in Pierce, despite the fact that there obviously are quite a few unhappy voters there. Now, there has been a theory that perhaps voters are quote unquote saving their baseball bats for the federal election. So the theory goes that people are not too unhappy with the WA State Labour Party. They are pretty angry at Albo. So what they're doing is they're re-electing the State Labour Party and kicking out Albo in the federal election to sort of give some balance where the Liberals can be in control in the federal parliament and the Labour Party can be in control of the state parliament to sort of make sure that no entity grows too strong. I'm not really too sure about what kind of historical basis there is to this sort of theory. Like, it's clear that the WA State Labour Party is more popular than the federal WA Labour Party. I mean, that's obvious, but I'm just not too sure about like if voters will purposely vote for WA Labour here because suspect that Dutton is going to win in the federal election and then therefore they feel like they need to provide balance or something like that. I think it's just more likely that they'll vote Labour here because they like WA State Labour, and then they'll vote Coalition in the federal because they like the federal coalition, and they might not like Albo. I don't think that there's sort of like a grand strategy going on here. But in my opinion, this points to the Labour Party surviving in Tangney, Kate Chaney surviving in Curtin, Ian Goodenough having a slim but possible chance in Moore, the Labour Party hanging on in Pierce, and I think the coalition will gain Bullwinkle. I think it's more likely that the Liberal Party will gain Bullwinkle at that stage because there were some polling booths I saw in the seats that correspond to Bullwinkle where there was actually a swing against the Nationals and a big swing to the Liberal Party. So my guess is at the moment that, yeah, probably the Liberal Party are going to win Bullwinkle as opposed to the National Party, but there will definitely be a contest between the two. Thank you, everybody who joined me on the stream on Saturday night, especially my guests, which were Sormon and Anglo Election Insights. We ended up staying up till like 1:30 a.m. The stream was like 4.5 hours long. We were just waiting to see if any more results were coming in really late at night, but it seems like it's probably going to be until like next week before we get like the definitive results of every single seat. I probably will make a short video about that after that happens. But yeah, that was a really good stream. I think it was the longest stream that we've done for one of these state or territory elections. I was pretty tired by the end of it, that was for sure. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Also, thanks a lot to JJ, Joeyo19, Tasmanaut, and Tron Politics for the super chat donations at the stream. This is the first time I've done this super chat thing before, and I really do appreciate the donations. And thank you everyone also who just came to the stream to watch as well. So it was nice to have so many people to interact with while we were watching the WA election results unfold. And I will be making a federal predictions video soon. I've just delayed it a bit because I'm waiting for some more data to happen. I think, like, obviously the floods not only delayed the election date, but I think it also might have delayed a couple of like polls coming out as well. I know there was like a Morgan poll like released yesterday, but Morgan polls like, flip everywhere. So I'm not going to make a video just on a Morgan poll. And there's also that, betting video that I want to do soon. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that before or after we get more data. The betting markets will probably be really slow to react to anything that happens anyway. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, even after this WA state election, the Libs are still the favorites in, like, Curtin and Tangney, which I find a bit surprising. The next state election, it might end up being Tasmania at this point, because I hear that there's a lot of sort of instability going on in Tasmania. So we might actually see yet another Tasmanian election later this year. I know there's like a Victorian election next year, and then the year after that there's South Australia, but it's going to be quite a while otherwise if we don't get that Tasmanian election. So it's pretty much all speed ahead for the federal election now. That's what's happening in, like, I don't know, sometime in the next 2 and a bit months. That's what I'll be focusing on for a while. Plus maybe a couple of little interesting videos here and there about this and that. I also want to sort of maybe make a video replying to some of the comments on my electoral reform video, because I did get some sort of interesting points of view on that video and I'd like to sort of talk about it. Anyway, that's it. Goodbye, everyone.